They took a surprise trip to Greece. I found out when my mom posted, "Nothing but real family on this journey." I stayed quiet. 2 days later, I got a notification. My emergency fund had been wiped. Flights, hotels, excursions. All on my card. Then my sister sent me a text meant for my dad. "He won't notice. His account's barely active." I replied. "I noticed." And flagged every charge, froze the account. At 6:03 a.m., my phone vibrated 23 times in a row from calls from. I was furious, and if I had checked my account 2 days ago, I would have reported them right then and there. But I didn't. I was busy with work, and I only checked that emergency fund once in a while because I hardly ever touched it. That's why it was so obvious when I opened the banking app and saw the balance had been drained. Nearly $7,000 gone. The first transaction was for flights, multiple tickets, all under one reservation. Then a charge from a resort in Santorini. Then a ferry booking, restaurant charges, a private cruise. It wasn't just a trip. It was a full-blown, luxury vacation. I froze. The names on the bookings weren't visible, but I didn't need them. I already knew who it was. Because 2 days earlier, I saw a Facebook post from my mom. Her, my dad, my sister Sarah and her boyfriend, my brother Mark and his girlfriend, all standing on a cliff somewhere in Greece, sun-drenched and smug, holding glasses of wine with the caption, "Nothing but real family on this journey." I remember staring at it, trying to understand if I'd missed something. Maybe they'd paid for it themselves. Maybe it was a last-minute gift from someone. I tried to believe that. I stayed quiet. I didn't comment or message anyone. I just scrolled past it like it didn't feel like a slap in the face. But now, seeing the numbers, it all clicked. The flight bookings matched the dates. The charges lined up with the photos. It wasn't just a theory anymore. They used my money. Not just borrowed it, stole it. Used it without asking, without telling me, while cutting me out of the trip entirely. That emergency fund was mine. I saved it for years. Medical stuff. Job loss. Not so they could sip wine on a cliff and post pictures about how real their family is. Then it got worse. An hour later, my sister sent me a text. Meant for my dad. I could tell by how it started. "He won't notice. His account's barely active." Then a second message. "We'll just say we thought he wasn't using it, lol." I stared at it for a second, then replied, "I noticed." She didn't respond. I called the bank immediately, reported every charge as unauthorized, flagged the account, and had it shut down. I filed a fraud report and gave the rep all their names. The woman on the phone asked me, just to clarify, "You're saying your family did this?" "Yes. My own family." At exactly 6:03 a.m. the next morning, my phone started vibrating nonstop. I counted 23 missed calls. My mom. My dad. Sarah. Even Mark, who never calls anyone. They were still in Greece. It was morning here, mid-afternoon over there. They must have woken up to a bunch of declined transactions and the news that their vacation was unraveling. I didn't answer. I just sent them one text. "If you want to change anything, you better come home now." And I meant it. Because what they didn't realize yet was that this wasn't going away. This wasn't going to be forgiven. This wasn't going to be chalked up to a misunderstanding. This was going to court. They didn't fly back right away. That was the first sign they weren't taking me seriously. The calls kept coming, but I ignored every one. Then came the texts, first from Sarah, short and fake casual. "Okay, what's going on with your card? We need to talk, lol." Then my mom chimed in with a more polished version. "Let's be calm about this, Henry. We didn't think you'd mind. We'll figure something out when we get back. No need to overreact." Overreact. They had just drained the only account I kept off limits. I had worked side jobs to build that fund up. That account was for when my car broke down in the middle of nowhere. For if I lost my job. For medical bills I couldn't cover with insurance. Not for my family to play rich for a week in Greece. And still, they thought I'd let it go. Mark didn't say a word. Ali, though, texted me separately. "I didn't know. I feel sick. They told me it was all taken care of. I wouldn't have come if I knew." I didn't answer her. Not yet. But I remembered that. That night, I had a video call with my lawyer. He was calm, methodical. He explained that yes, this was fraud. Yes, it could absolutely go to court. The fact that it was family didn't protect them, it actually made it worse, because it showed intent. They knew what they were doing when they took my card information. They planned this. So I told him to move forward. I wanted this on record. The next morning, I got a string of panicked messages from my mom. Apparently, their cards were getting declined all over the island. Because every charge had been flagged, the bank locked down their reservations and canceled bookings. I knew the moment they woke up and tried to book a day trip or grab lunch, and suddenly their vacation card didn't work. One message stood out. "We're stranded here now. Are you happy?" And another. "How could you do this to us?" I stared at that one for a long time. Then I replied, "Return immediately or deal with this from overseas. Either way, I'm not stopping the case." For a while, everything went quiet. Then, late that afternoon, I got forwarded flight confirmations. They were coming home. The next day, around 10 a.m., I heard the knock at my door. I didn't want to open it, but I did. There they were. All 6 of them. My mom went first, with this half-rehearsed speech about misunderstandings and family and forgiveness. She said they assumed the account was shared, which was such a lie it actually made me laugh. My dad stood silently, arms crossed like he was some kind of victim in all this. Sarah launched into a guilt trip, talking about how I embarrassed them, ruined their vacation, made them feel like criminals. Mark finally spoke up. "Just unfreeze the account and let's move on." I told them point blank, I wasn't unfreezing anything. The bank was investigating. My lawyer was filing a case. That's when my mom snapped. "This is what you do to your own family? You're ruining your own parents' lives over a vacation? You should apologize to us. And to your sister. And your brother. This is ridiculous." I stood there, just letting the words hang in the air. Then I said, "You used my money without permission. Lied about it. Excluded me. And now you want me to apologize? You're seriously going to sue us?" Sarah said. "Yes," I said. "And you're lucky all I'm doing is suing. You're lucky I'm not pressing criminal charges." Silence. That was when I saw it, the flicker of real panic. The part where it hit them that this wasn't just a family fight anymore. This was legal. I told them to leave. My dad looked like he wanted to yell, but didn't. My mom stormed out first. Sarah called me, vindictive, on the way down the hall. Mark didn't even look back. Only Allie paused for a second, almost said something, but followed the rest. I closed the door behind them and locked it. For the first time since this all started, I felt completely done with them. The revenge had only just begun. I gave them 3 full days after they landed. Not out of patience, out of curiosity. I wanted to see if even one of them would own up to what they did. Nothing. Not a single apology. No messages. No offers to repay a cent. Just silence, like the whole thing could be swept under a rug and forgotten. On the morning of the 4th day, my lawyer filed the paperwork. Official complaint, unauthorized use of financial assets totaling $6,837.42. Filed under intentional misuse. Supporting documents included transaction history, flagged fraud reports, text messages, including the one Sarah sent me by mistake, and a signed affidavit from me. He'd even attached a timeline. It looked airtight. That same day, my parents showed up unannounced again. This time, I didn't even bother opening the door. I sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee while listening to them argue outside like 2 people who still couldn't agree whose idea it was. My dad wanted to fix it quietly. But my mom was already stuck in the fantasy that I'd come to my senses if they just applied enough guilt. They left after 10 minutes. I didn't move from my chair. 2 days later, they all got served. Dad at his job walked out of a morning meeting to find a guy in a windbreaker holding an envelope with his name on it. Mom at their front door. I heard she slammed it so hard the windows rattled. Sarah was served at her apartment in front of her boyfriend. She texted me, "You are sick. What kind of brother does this?" Mark got his at work. I didn't hear from him directly, but Allie told me he called the whole thing a show and said I was just trying to punish everyone for being happy. That night, Sarah posted a long rant on Instagram. One of those ugly, self-righteous ones. It started with, "Sometimes blood doesn't mean family." Then it spiraled into how I had blindsided everyone. How I was obsessed with control. And how she should have known he'd eventually turn on us. Comments started rolling in, siding with her. Nobody knew the full story. She didn't include the part about using someone else's money to go on vacation and bragging online while doing it. Then came the group call. They must have been sitting in the same room because it was chaos from the second I picked up. I didn't even plan to answer. I just wanted to hear how desperate they'd become. Mom went first, her voice sharp, saying I'd taken things way too far. And was ripping this family apart over a misunderstanding. Dad jumped in, saying it wasn't theft, it was a shared family fund. There was no such thing. That card was only in my name. Always had been. Mark said I was making them look like criminals, and Sarah called me vile. I waited until they all burned themselves out. Then I said, 3 options: admit what you did and face the consequences, fight me in court and lose, or beg. They all started talking at once again, but I hung up. After that, the silence was different. Heavier. They finally understood I wasn't bluffing. Then Allie texted. She said things at Mark's place had gotten tense. That he was lashing out, blaming her for not warning him how serious I was. She said my mom kept going off in the family group chat, trying to turn everyone against me. But then she said something I didn't expect. I'm not with them on this. What they did was disgusting. You're the only sane one here. I stared at that text for a long time. She was still technically dating Mark. Still in that orbit. But she saw it for what it was. She said the part no one else would admit. They always treat you like a backup plan. I've seen it. They act like you owe them something just for existing. I think you're doing the right thing even if it hurts. That's when it all clicked for me. They didn't just steal money. They stole from the one person they assumed would never fight back. They counted on me to stay quiet, stay out of their way, and maybe if I was lucky, they'd send me a souvenir t-shirt from Santorini when it was all over. But this time, I had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. Because the moment they got served, it stopped being about family. It became justice. They thought court was the worst thing that could happen. They were wrong. A week after they were served, my lawyer called me with a question I wasn't expecting. Would you be open to a public hearing? I paused. You mean like, people can attend? He said. It would be on record anyway. But if they don't settle, it could be open court. And since it involves family fraud and financial misuse, it might get picked up by local media. I didn't even hesitate. Let it be public. And just like that, their worst nightmare started brewing. Word started getting out. My uncle called me randomly to ask if things were really that serious. My cousin messaged me. What happened between you guys? My mom said your parents might be going to court? I didn't feed anyone the full story. I didn't need to. They were doing it to themselves. Then, something strange happened. My dad's employer contacted him for a compliance review. Apparently, when you're in a finance-adjacent role and your name comes up in a public fraud suit, even a personal one, it raises flags. He wasn't fired, but he was reassigned. Sarah's boyfriend bailed. Just ghosted her. Packed his stuff, moved out, and blocked her on everything. I only found out because Sarah posted a vague, sobbing video to her story talking about how betrayal comes in waves. Someone sent it to me. I didn't watch the whole thing. Then I got a call from Allie. She sounded nervous. You need to know something, she said. She told me she'd overheard a conversation, Mark and my mom talking in the backyard. Apparently, they were trying to figure out if there was any way to claim I had approved the charges. That maybe they could argue it was verbal consent, or that I'd offered to help out. Allie shut that down. She said, if they even try to lie, I'll testify. I was there. I know what happened. I believed her. I told her if she needed protection from all this, I'd help however I could. Then came the panic. My mom called crying, actual sobbing, not performative like Sarah. She begged me not to let this go to court. Said she and my dad were going to lose everything. That they couldn't afford to pay back the amount, and that a judgment against them would ruin their retirement. I asked her flatly, did you ever think about that when you booked the trip? She hung up. 2 days later, they tried to settle. Through my lawyer, they offered to repay the full amount plus $500 for damages if I dropped the case and signed an NDA. I said no. I wanted it on record. The night before the hearing, Mark showed up at my door. I didn't let him in. He just stood there, pacing in the hallway, saying things like, "You're gonna regret this, man," and "You don't understand what you're doing to this family." I didn't say anything. Then he muttered something that stuck with me. "You're not even one of us anymore." And that was when it hit me. He meant it. All of them did. They'd cut me out in their minds a long time ago. The trip without me wasn't an accident. It was intentional. They never expected me to fight back because they never considered me part of the group to begin with. That was the unexpected part. It wasn't just about the money. It was about finally seeing them clearly. They were never my family. Not really. Just people I was related to. Court was set for Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. sharp. I got there early, partly because my lawyer asked me to, but mostly because I wanted to be prepared. I hadn't slept much the night before. I'd run every possible version of what might happen through my head. Would they cry? Lie? Apologize? Would I care? They arrived 5 minutes before it started. All 4 of them. My dad in a wrinkled suit, Sarah in a blazer she clearly borrowed, my mom holding a manila folder like it was a weapon, and Mark with that same blank stare he always wore when he knew he was cornered. None of them looked at me. We sat on opposite sides of the room. The courtroom wasn't big, but it was echo quiet. 2 people I didn't recognize were sitting in the back, probably reporters. A woman who used to be our neighbor came in too. She glanced between both sides like she wasn't sure who to root for. The case was officially labeled Henry Wilkins v. The Wilkins family, and just seeing it typed out like that on the docket board outside made me feel like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The judge was an older woman, no-nonsense type. As soon as the session opened, my lawyer stood and presented everything. Timeline. Transactions. The card was mine. No one else had permission. The charges were made from IP addresses tied to my parents' house and Sarah's apartment. The travel agency's receipts showed their names on the bookings. And then he read the text. The one Sarah sent to me by mistake. He won't notice. His account's barely active. There was a pause in the room after that. Everyone understood. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. Then it was their turn. My dad spoke first. He tried to look calm, reasonable. Said the account had been used in good faith, and that they believed it was shared family money. The judge interrupted. Is your name on the account? No, but was your son made aware of the charges before they were made? No. Sarah tried to jump in, said something about how I'd always helped in the past, and how she assumed I'd want to contribute to the trip since I didn't seem interested in coming. The judge asked, Were you invited on the trip? No, I said. Mark just sat there like a statue. My mom started crying as soon as the judge started summarizing the case. This isn't about miscommunication, the judge said. This is about entitlement and deliberate misuse of financial access. The court finds that the plaintiff's claims are valid and supported by evidence. Then came the ruling. Full repayment of $6,837.42, plus $2,000 in civil damages for emotional and financial distress. And then, something none of them expected. 30 days of community service for both of my parents. Because the court determined it was premeditated misuse of funds and involved deliberate exclusion and manipulation. You could hear Sarah gasp. Mark muttered "unbelievable" under his breath. My mom stood up like she was going to protest but just froze. My dad stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight. The bailiff handed them a packet, details of the repayment timeline, the penalty, and instructions for reporting to their assigned community service officer. It was real now. Official. I stood outside the courthouse afterward, letting the air hit my face. Allie had come after all. She waited by the fountain across the plaza and gave me this little nod when I looked over. Just a simple nod, but it meant everything. Then I saw them leaving. Sarah walked out first, storming past reporters who tried to ask her a question. Mark followed her, already texting someone. My dad looked dazed. But my mom stopped right in front of me. Looked me in the eyes. You've destroyed this family, she said like it was the final word. But I didn't say anything. Because I hadn't destroyed anything. They had burned the bridge. I just stopped pretending it was still standing. It didn't take long for things to fall apart completely. The day after the trial, I got a series of emails from the court system confirming payment plans had been enforced. My parents would be docked monthly, and failure to comply would escalate things even further. My lawyer said they tried to negotiate again after the verdict, offering to pay the principal but not the damages. We declined. That afternoon, I blocked every one of their numbers. I knew they'd try to reach out eventually. Probably not to apologize, just to try one last guilt trip, or to rewrite what happened. But I wasn't interested. I had my closure. The surprising part? It wasn't silence. It was begging. They started contacting friends of mine. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly sent me screenshots, texts from my mom and Sarah trying to explain the situation, or ask them to talk to Henry. A few even said I was exaggerating, and that he wouldn't really want us to suffer like this. Even strangers started messaging me on social media. My cousin told me my family was framing me as mentally unstable and manipulated by a lawyer. I didn't reply to a single message. I'd said what I needed to say, in court, under oath. A few weeks later, Mark officially cut me off. I found out through Ali. He sent a text to the family group chat, which I wasn't in, obviously. As far as I'm concerned, Henry's no longer my brother. Sarah unfollowed me from everything. Her Instagram now said something about starting over with real ones only. My mom deleted all her posts about the trip. My dad? Radio silence. And yet, through all of it, Ali kept checking in. She'd left Mark a few days after the trial. She said she couldn't stand how they handled it, how no one took responsibility, and how quickly they turned on me like I was the problem. She said, "You did the right thing. I saw what they were like behind your back. Honestly, I'm glad it all came out." We started talking more. Not just about what happened. About everything. Life. Work. Family, or lack thereof. It was weird, how something so ugly ended up showing me the only real connection I had among any of them wasn't even with someone I was related to. One day, about a month after the trial, Ali called and said something that stuck with me. "You know, they're still obsessed with you. Still talking about you like you're the one who ruined their lives." I said, "Good. Let them talk." But before she hung up, she added something else. "Your mom's been trying to meet with someone. I don't know who, but Mark mentioned something about finding a way to reverse the ruling. He said she's got a plan." I didn't say anything. I just listened. Because maybe it was a bluff. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe, just maybe, they still hadn't learned. And if they wanted to come for me again, well, this time, I'd be waiting. The update. 3 months passed. Life settled into a rhythm, quieter, better. I moved to a new place across town, closer to work, and updated all my info. I didn't give the new address to anyone in the family. Not even Ali, until weeks later. It wasn't paranoia, it was just peace. And I wanted to protect it. The money started coming in slowly. Court-ordered payments trickled into my account from my parents' bank, always scheduled, always partial. Just enough to remind me the system was doing what it was supposed to. They never missed one, probably because they couldn't afford to. Skipping a payment would have triggered wage garnishment. Ali and I stayed in touch. We weren't dating, not exactly, but there was something unspoken there. Connection through survival. She'd left Mark for good. Said she realized the whole family ran on some unwritten code of manipulation, and she wanted no part of it anymore. One Friday afternoon, my lawyer called. I hadn't heard from him since the final court paperwork, so I figured it was a routine update. It wasn't. He said someone had filed a petition with the court to have the judgment reconsidered. I didn't need to guess who. My mom, apparently. She'd claimed emotional distress, legal misrepresentation, and misunderstood intent. She even filed a statement suggesting that I'd been coerced into filing charges. It was weak. Nothing substantial. But it had to be reviewed. They thought they'd wear me down. But I showed up for the review hearing without hesitation. This time, it wasn't dramatic. No reporters. Just a quiet side room and a judge who looked annoyed that the case had been reopened. My lawyer tore through their petition in less than 5 minutes. Pointed out the contradictions, the lack of new evidence, and the ridiculous claim that I had been manipulated into suing. Then he dropped the final piece. A signed letter from Ali. She hadn't told me she was doing it, but apparently, when she heard about the petition, she called my lawyer herself. The letter detailed what she witnessed. How the trip was planned behind my back. How they knew exactly what they were doing. How they laughed about using my card. When the judge read that last paragraph aloud, my mom actually tried to interrupt. The judge cut her off immediately. Petition denied. The ruling stands. It was done. For real this time. No more appeals. No more calls. No more threats. And just like that, the final thread snapped. I wasn't tied to them anymore, not by guilt, obligation, or silence. They didn't try anything else after that. No more messages. No more half-hearted apologies. Just nothing.